We've just become very black and white, haven't we? Especially in nutrition, I think. And it's just become something is either good or it's bad. And that is really infuriating. You know, I work in eating disorders and I spend a lot of time saying to people, there is no good, there is no bad. All food can be nutritious and it can all play a role in our diet.
Yeah.
It's about balance and moderation.
Welcome back to the Sweet Taste of Balance podcast series. We're on episode 6, ultra-processed foods. What does this mean, and does this include soft drinks? My name is Dr Idrees Mughal, and today I'm here with Priya Tew. Hi, nice to meet you.
Thanks so much for having me.
No, of course, it's a pleasure. So before we get into this juicy topic today around all things ultra-processed foods, could you just explain to the audience, who you are and what is it that you do on a day-to-day basis?
So my name's Priya, I'm a dietitian. I'm specifically an eating disorder dietitian and a specialist in IBS.
Fascinating.
Which is irritable bowel syndrome, as you know. I work predominantly in private practice, so I run Dietitian UK doing online consultations, but I also work with brands and with the media and do all of that kind of work. And I love calling out things that are going on social media as well, which I know you do a lot of. I run a Pilates studio as well. So that's basically, how I look after my mental health and my fitness. And then my most important and hardest job ever, I would say, is I'm mum to 6 children.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
6. Yeah, that's difficult to say the least. Yeah. And balancing everything at the same time as well. So, yeah, fantastic stuff. Am I correct in saying that, are they small children, old children?
So they range from 8 to 14.
Okay.
So they're all quite close,
okay.
Really.
So is it correct to say that there are a proportion of your cupboards are comprised of ultra-processed foods?
We definitely have a snack cupboard.
Okay.
Let's put it that way. And there are ultra-processed foods most definitely in my house, yes.
Okay, fantastic. So why don't we dive into this juicy, controversial, often controversial topic, right? First of all, what are ultra-processed foods?
So these are foods that have been changed from their natural form. And we know that almost every food we eat is processed. So we're not wanting to say that processed foods are bad in any way. In actual fact, food has to be processed in order for us to eat it a lot of the time.
Yes.
It has to be packaged, it has to be cooked. Even the act of chopping food when you eat it is a form of processing. We've got 4 different ways of thinking about how foods are processed. We've got the de novo classification of processed food. The first one is foods that are minimally processed. And this is basically foods in their natural form. So that could be if you have some almonds, for example, if you've just picked them and you're having some almonds, or fruit and vegetables, they would form into that as well. And then we've got the second classification, so that is processed ingredients. And that's things that are added in, such as sugar or salt or oils.
Okay.
Okay, and then we've got the third classification.
So would that include things like flavoured yogurts?
Not yet. It's just the ingredients. So it could be the flavouring rather than the yogurt itself.
Ah, okay, interesting.
But then when we come on to the third step, we have got processed foods. And that's going to be where our minimally processed foods and those ingredients that are processed are pushed together and make a food. So that could be, for example, if you've got your tin of tuna in oil. You've got the tuna, you've got the oil, you put it in a can. It's processed, but it's not ultra-processed.
Right.
So then we've got ultra-processed. Now, I personally think we need to rethink how we categorise ultra-processed foods, but this is the best we've got right now. So ultra-processed is anything that has been more processed than that. So some of the ways of describing that, sometimes we talk about there being more than 5 ingredients in a product.
Okay.
There could be ingredients in there that you don't find in your kitchen cupboard. If you have a little look at the back of the label and you read it and think, I don't recognise half of these ingredients, it's probably an ultra-processed food.
Right.
So you could have things like emulsifiers in there, and you could have preservatives and additives and flavourings that you wouldn't find at home.
Right. Okay. So basically what you're implying is lots of ingredients that you typically can't buy as an outright ingredient in the supermarket.
Yes.
So, outside of your normal, Cajun seasoning, your paprika, your, thyme, So basically, you're saying like a lot of these emulsifiers, a lot of these additives or gelling agents, or
Yeah.
some of these things that are put together within the complex of a natural food, but they form now a whole new product. And these are things that we would classify as ultra processed foods, right?
Absolutely. So you've taken things like maybe your oats and you've added all of these extra ingredients in, you've done a whole kind of mixing process and smushing together and you've made a cereal bar. That's now going to be
Right.
ultra processed.
Very, very useful there. I hope people are starting to understand what these different criteria are. Now, just as a side note, before we touch on soft drinks in general, do you see any limitations with this kind of classification system?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've come to this point where we are sticking all ultra processed foods into one category, and that's quite problematic because when we look at the research, we actually know that not all ultra processed foods have the same impact on the body and on our health. But when you look at what the media is saying and what social media is saying, we've got information coming out that's saying all ultra processed foods are bad.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be eating any of them, and they are all bad for our health. Now, I've had a little look into the research, and I've seen that actually things like yogurts and dairy, wholemeal bread and dark bread is what it's actually called in the research, and some whole grain breakfast cereals do not have that impact on our health. They are not necessarily negative or harmful for us.
Yeah.
But they're still ultra processed foods.
Yeah, I think that also extends to, some products in the kind of fitness space, in the exercise performance space. A lot of these low added sugar, protein bars that are probably made from a whey isolate or a vegan pea isolate, that have low levels of saturated fat, low levels of refined sugar intake, and even, fiber enhanced, products or fiber enhanced bars. Like, from an objective standpoint, their nutritional value is actually decent. It might be ultra processed and it might not be as satiating as a minimally processed food, but I don't know why people just love to jump on this bandwagon of, oh, it's processed rubbish. And therefore, no matter how much fiber it has, no matter how much, protein it has, or high quality protein to say the least, no matter how, how many healthy fats it has, it's just all garbage. Like, where do you think this kind of mindset comes from?
We've just become very black and white, haven't we?
Dichotomous
Especially in
beliefs.
nutrition, I
Yeah.
think. And it's just become something is either good or it's bad. And that is really infuriating. I work in eating disorders and I spend a lot of time saying to people, there is no good, there is no bad. All food can be nutritious and it can all play a role in our diet.
Yeah.
It's about balance and moderation.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that we get that message out there, that we don't have to be cutting things out entirely.
Yeah.
We've just got to find that middle ground.
Some of the most kind of eye-opening moments for me in medicine was when I was actually getting experience in an eating disorder inpatient unit in the West Midlands. And honestly, just seeing these people who are severely, severely, underweight, where, BMIs of 8, 9, right? And their mindset around food, obviously influenced by external factors, their upbringing, lots of other problems. And a lot of this messaging just exacerbates the problem. And what I saw with several of these patients, severely, severely ill patients, was they were even scared to consume a single piece of cornflake because of this whole processed garbage, all forms of sugar are bad, and any kind of, anything that's got, moderate calorie numbers are just, poison. And it's like, this is the real life consequence of taking that stem of thinking, that line of thinking, to the extreme. And it was just absolutely eye-opening. Since I had that experience, I've been trying to be really careful with how I get my messaging across because of, the actual real life consequences it can have on many people. So yeah, it's a fascinating topic here. About soft drinks, would you say they are ultra processed in nature? What's your opinion on soft drinks?
I would say the majority of them are going to be ultra processed in nature, but that doesn't instantly rule them out from our diet. As we've said, all things can be included. And I think that's where the problem becomes, where we go, right, they're ultra processed, that's it, they're out.
We see a lot in the media and on social media, these kind of false dichotomous comparisons between, things like orange juice and things like, soft drinks, fizzy soft drinks, right? What do you think about this whole argument that, sugar is sugar? You may as well have a full sugar fizzy beverage, because as opposed to the orange juice, because at least the full sugar beverage is probably not ideal for you. What's your opinion about this whole comparison between fruit juice and, soft drink?
It's just completely bonkers, in my opinion. I mean, just some of that information that's come out recently drove me completely nuts. Orange juice, when we think about it, 100% pure orange juice, firstly, is not ultra processed. It contains fiber. It's got flavonoids in it. It's got vitamin C in it. And when we combine something like orange juice with a meal, it can help us absorb our iron.
Yeah.
So it's got some great benefits to it. It's also counting as one of our 5 a day in terms of our fruit and vegetable intake. There's so much research telling us people need to eat more fruit and vegetables.
Oh, yeah.
Why on earth are we telling them not to have a glass of orange juice?
Yeah.
It's nuts. Now, I agree you don't want to be having orange juice with every single meal. The recommendation is 150 mils of orange juice a day. That's your one portion. Yeah. And not to have more than that. And that's because of the free sugar that's in there. So we've already got that guidance there. We don't need to be saying anything else about sugar is toxic, orange juice is bad for you. When we think about fizzy drinks, for example, that maybe do contain sugar, then once again, I think we have to have that caution around them because they have got sugar there. That doesn't mean we can't be drinking them. It's thinking, why can't we have the same messaging as we have around orange juice? Have it maybe once a day. Here is the limit of how much. This is the sensible amount to be having because of the sugar that's in there. Instead, we just have a messaging of either it's all fine to have or don't have any. We have the yes or the no messaging.
Yeah, very, very, very fantastic points there. I was just, as you were talking there, I was just remembering some of the controlled research that I've come across surrounding orange juice in particular, and even commercially store-bought orange juice. That's just normal pressed orange juice, right? They haven't added any sugars to it or anything else. And the dosages that I've come across in the literature are often 250 to 500 ml of orange juice a day, and in controlled human interventions, there have been fantastic benefits for cognitive function, memory, concentration, also exercise recovery, and also certain metabolic markers have also seemed to increase, when consuming a slightly higher dose than what is recommended. And I'm wondering if that guidance is probably because, these organizations are aware that the average person is probably over consuming total calories. So to avoid, adding a bunch of liquid calories, which is probably obviously not going to satiate you as well as minimally processed food, I'm wondering if, they've almost accounted for, even though there are potential benefits of consuming things like 100% freshly squeezed orange juice, right? Let's try and go towards the lower end to try and avoid the overconsumption of food, because I know in a lot of these trials they're obviously trying to adjust and they're trying to control for total calorie intake in the day. So yeah, I'm very surprised by that 150 ml kind of recommended upper limit, despite some of the controlled research that I've seen. So yeah, I think it's fascinating the interplay between managing the overall dietary pattern, trying to ensure we don't overconsume total calories for the week, because obviously all the weight-related conditions that come with that are obviously quite harmful. But then you get the benefits from the polyphenols, the the vitamins, the minerals, the other beneficial components of freshly squeezed juices. Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and I also think the comparison between freshly squeezed juice and soft drinks is just absurd. Yeah. It's really, you won't find a single controlled intervention that shows a soft drink having any of the benefits you get from any, fruit juice intervention. I think it's just a ridiculous comparison.
Yeah, it is. And I also think it was a big marketing ploy, to be honest. I think it's a way of getting more traction, getting more people to kind of click. And
Yeah.
that is harmful in itself on social media.
Yes.
Because then that's going to have more people watching and more people confused about nutritional messages. We need positive messages out there and not negative ones, in my opinion.
It's the confusion aspect, isn't it? I think back in 2018 there was a study done about Twitter posts and the spread of false information, and they found that the speed or the rate at which false information spreads compared to true news information can be up to 6 times faster. So when you purposely confuse and generate controversy with these kind of false comparisons or illogical comparisons, you're encouraging people to share, to ask questions, to comment, be like, is this really valid? And it just further perpetuates the issue. It just further exacerbates the problem of this food environment that's leading to increased health anxiety, increased disordered eating. And you and I both know from working with people literally that have been affected by this, and the thousands of messages that I get saying, I've been so confused, and I just find it just it's just a real shame that the way that the media narrative and social media narrative is moving is more to a confused space and less to a logical and reasonable space. I'm just wondering how we can get around this. It's difficult.
Oh my goodness, I'd love to know the answer. I think one of the big things that frustrates me the most is that everybody has an opinion on nutrition.
Oh, God.
Absolutely, that's great. We should all be thinking about it and researching it and doing all of those things. But everybody seems to be able to share their opinion on social media, whether they have a qualification or not.
Yeah.
And I think such a key message to get out there is to check people's qualifications. A doctor may not have much training in nutrition, for example. You might be following someone who's done a weekend course in nutrition. So to be really careful where you're getting that information from, because as somebody who was at university for 6 years and then has done ongoing training, I find it so frustrating that just anybody can get up and share duff information out there.
Yeah, it's because everyone eats to live. So it's like, because I engage in this action, I now have an opinion that I think is right. Like a great analogy I like to say is, you never see people arguing online, talking about what's the best way to build a skyscraper, right? Like, what's the best way to fly a plane apart from pilots? You wouldn't see that because no one engages in that action unless you're actually qualified. Yeah. So the rationale that people think that they can just comment on all things nutrition, despite not being trained, is just it's just one of these my personal anecdote trumps your science, right? So fascinating topic. And just to kind of round off, do you think that non-sugar sweetened beverages, do they have utility in the diet? And even though they are an ultra-processed food, should they be grouped together with a lot of these other ultra-processed products?
So you've got a couple of questions in there. I think coming back to, should we be having soft drinks in our diet even though they're ultra processed? I don't think we should be removing any ultra processed foods from our diet. I think we have to have caution over them, but if there's something that really bring you pleasure, then part of the role of food is to bring pleasure. And so that means that you can include them. But for example, I love tea.
Yep.
I could drink tea all day if I wanted, and it would make me very happy on the one hand, but I also feel slightly sick when I've had too much of it. And I know it's not great for my body and my mind and my concentration and my mood. So therefore, I have to limit it. Yeah. And so I stick to my 3 cups of tea a day, and then I move on to something else. Now, I would say it's the same with ultra processed foods. So looking and seeing what you are consuming, what you are drinking, and then choosing which ones you are going to have on a regular basis and how often you're going to have them. Is really important. But I also think the message around having to cut all of them out is harmful, because we've got people who just can't do that.
Yes.
And so just giving out a message of don't drink these, don't drink these drinks, don't have these foods, we're not showing people what to do instead, or giving them really helpful practical solutions.
No, good point. Food insecurity, accessibility, affordability, it's just, for many people from that come from low income households, it's just practically impossible to cut out all ultra processed food. It's really, really hard because they're often the foods that are available at corner shops, at the local kind of supermarket. They're the ones that are cheapest. They're the ones that probably, will probably keep you, for example, spending £4 or £5 on a punnet of raspberries, twice a week is probably very unreasonable for many people struggling to do their weekly shop for a family of 4.
Well,
right?
and the time as well.
And the time.
I'm feeding 8 people every day in my household.
Your household, for example.
I do bake for the kids' lunch boxes. They've got blueberry muffins, homemade this week. They're going to run out soon. They're going to get something out the cupboard.
Because imagine how much it would cost and just the time it takes to, get 5-6 individual packs of blueberries to give to each one of your children every day for school. It's like, that's just completely unreasonable. Until there's governmental or policy change around the affordability of minimally processed foods, I think it's virtually impossible to completely eradicate all ultra processed food for the average person living in this country, right? This is a fantastic conversation around the nuance of ultra processed foods, and I hope this has helped ease some anxiety for those who perhaps used to think that all ultra processed foods are evil and I should do my best to avoid everything, right? Yeah, so fantastic conversation about ultra processed foods in general. Just as a final point, what do you think some potential benefits or utility of including non-sugar sweetened products into our diet might include?
I think sweeteners definitely have a role. They can bring palatability, they can bring taste. And I completely agree that we want people to be reducing some of the sugar they have in their diet. Certainly some people are over consuming sugar. We know that in the UK. And using sweeteners can help with that journey. And they can help you almost step back the amount of sugar you're having, which can also have an impact on your calories and the energy that you're having as well in your diet. And we know that sugar is not good for our teeth. There is a health claim on sweeteners saying that actually they are absolutely fine for our teeth. So that's another really big benefit. So I think we've got a whole range of benefits for sweeteners. We don't need to be scared about them. We know that there's an acceptable daily intake for them and that limit is set, and they're all tested in the UK as well.
Yeah, no, fantastic point. I think when you look at all of the, controlled interventions, and you look at the actual, what was the purpose of designing and producing these non-sugar sweeteners is to replace added sugars in the diet. They're literally there as a substitute, right? So if you look at, McGlynn and colleagues in 22, meta-analysis of over a dozen controlled human trials, if you look at all of the analyses and all of the studies that are replacing refined sugar sweetened beverages with non-sugar sweetened beverages, you get indirect and direct benefits on body fat measurements, on total weight, on blood lipids, on liver enzymes, glycemic control. So I think people, if you have a sweet tooth like myself, I've got several I've had several cavities and fillings because of my sweet tooth back in the day. So for me, having a drink or two a day of non-sugar sweetened beverage really helps me keep the rest of my diet in check. I think people often forget that. They often forget that if you're someone that does exceed or used to exceed the refined sugar intake recommended upper limits, right, which I absolutely did, right, just having these couple of sweetened tasting beverages or products allow me to keep a hold on those cravings, and I don't find myself looking for these products anymore. So I've indirectly reduced my calorie intake. I've indirectly maybe improved my body composition. I've improved my glycemic control. I've improved many other parameters that people might not be thinking about. So I think that's it's an amazing point, and I think they can have some real utility, especially when they're there as they're there to do what they're meant to do, which is replace refined sugars. So yeah, I think there are several potential pros of having if you come from a sweet tooth upbringing, or you really like those kind of foods, then I think definitely they can have indirect benefits for you.
And there's no such thing as a perfect diet.
Of course.
So it's okay to have some of these foods now and again, and to listen to our hunger cues, to listen to our taste cues, and to be satisfying some of those. So I love the way you've done that. You've replaced some of the sweeter stuff with some sweetened beverages instead, and that's worked for you. I think that's a fabulous example of how these products can be useful.
Yeah, the last time I've had a chocolate or ice cream was probably weeks ago, whereas I used to have it, 4 or 5 times a week, and I used to indulge and go to restaurants that just dessert parlors, right? But so I hope other people have also had this experience, and I hope this episode's encouraged people to not be so fearful of all ultra processed foods, and to take things in moderation and look for places in the diet where they could potentially serve some benefit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a fantastic conversation today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope this will help many people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.